Imagine working from home with no office stress, no short-tempered boss, and no overly curious colleagues. Just you, your well-being, and your self-care. But then, you feel ill to your stomach, so you go get checked, only to find out you're in need of an urgent operation. But you're a gig worker. In other terms, you have no paid sick leave, no health insurance, and let's not even talk about that low income that is everything but stable. What was once a dream has now become a nightmare. The so-called freedom, flexibility, autonomy only costed you your rights, first as a human, second as a worker, and maybe even your life. Esteemed judges, respected educators, my dearest audience, good morning. I am sorry for starting off so brutally, but this matter went beyond my control. When individuals pretend to want what's best for you, only to gain more, I couldn't let that happen. Not to my people, not on my watch. If I've lost you, let us take a step back. Ask yourself, what is gig economy? According to the Cambridge Dictionary, gig economy is a way of working that is based on people having temporary jobs or complete individual tasks, each paid separately, rather than working for an employer. Employees' rights are the protections that a worker has to ensure that they are treated in a fair, morally acceptable, and legal way. These rights, many of which were hard-won over the last century, aim to protect, shield our workers from exploitation, and ensure that they can maintain a reasonable standard of living. The term erosion in this context implies their gradual destruction. If words can express concern, numbers scream urgency. As a survey done by Pew Research Center in 2020 shows that 70% of gig workers in the US receive no health insurance, and 89% lack access to paid sick leave or vacation. If this is not enough, companies like Uber and Deliveroo are raking in billions of dollars in profits by classifying their workers as independent contractors rather than employees. This practice risks creating a workforce with fewer rights, no safety net, and income insecurity, marking a significant step backward. Worry not, my friends. My house and I will be discussing these matters later on. Gig economy is not just changing how we work. It's replacing traditional jobs, the ones with security, benefits, and fair treatment, with unstable gig work. Companies are cutting off full-time roles, claiming it's a way to save money, but really, it's just workers paying the price. According to the Economic Policy Institute, this trend doesn't just hurt individuals. It drags wages down for everyone, forcing stable income to compete with underpaid gig work. This is not just a matter for us, it's for everyone. Tell me, are you ready to bear this system where in 10 or even 15 years where stability and dignity are sacrificed for gain of corporations? Ladies and gentlemen, gig economy is not just a threat to its workers, but to the very fabric of our society. It sets a dangerous precedent where companies value profits over people, and the rights we fought so hard to secure are eroded one gig at a time. We need a future where innovation doesn't come at the expense of fairness. We need a future to all of us. Thank you.
Dear opponents, I would ask you to open your ears and follow carefully, because what I'm about to say will show you that your first intervention was unfounded. The gig economy, an emergent force that has taken over the world, reshaping industries and creating opportunities for millions. This is the future we're talking about, ladies and gentlemen. The future of a labor market that is evolving to meet the demands of modern economies. And yet, there are still those who persist in painting the gig economy as the inevitable downfall of workers' rights. Such a perspective, if I may say, is not only short-sighted, but dismissive of the progress being made. Respected Assembly, Honorable Judges, Government House, greetings. Time and time again, history has shown us that industries adapt, societies evolve, and progress triumphs. The gig economy is no exception. Change is happening, and it's happening for the better. So believe it or not, we are so far from witnessing something as drastic as the erosion of workers' rights. In fact, we never will, because across the globe, policymakers are rolling up their sleeves to tailor labor protections to the realities of the gig economy. Take Singapore, for instance, a nation often associated with strict laws and chewing gum bans, but apparently they're also quite flexible when it comes to their gig workers. The Advisory Committee on Platform Workers works to maintain their self-employed status while enhancing access to pensions and workplace protections. It's as if Singapore said, why chew gum when you can chew over gig-friendly policies instead? Now, let's cross over to France.
POI?
POI accepted?
How do you talk about how do you talk about progress if it's at the expense of human dignity?
Progress is not at the expense of dignity. In fact, these are going to help a lot with giving the rights, the workers' rights, the traditional workers' rights, their rights. More rights than ever before. Moving on, France. Their auto-entrepreneur scheme adds a pinch of flexibility and a dollop of social security benefits, ensuring gig workers don't just survive, they thrive. Over in the UAE, they've introduced expat visa schemes that make freelancing a breeze for both high and low-skilled workers. And then there is Spain, with its riders' law, which reclassified delivery drivers as employees. Spain seems to be saying, let's not just deliver packages, let's deliver fairness. And across the Atlantic, the US is no exception to gig economy debates. Organizations like the Gig Workers Committee or Collective are working to ensure that gig workers receive their rights. And California took it a step further with Assembly Bill 5, which reclassified many independent contractors as employees. Ladies and gentlemen, these are just a few of the many examples and initiatives taken by countries around the world. While progress may seem slow at times, the results are undeniably significant. And as the saying goes, if you take small steps every day, you'll eventually get there. And yet, I believe that for our opponents, this progress is something they simply fail to see. As the American social activist and economist Stiglitz once said, workers' rights should be a central focus of development. And for once, I can say that this is becoming a reality. The world is changing, and it's changing for the better again. So, ladies and gentlemen, please, open up and embrace this change. This universal fight is far from over, and I can already tell who's winning. Thank you.
Excuse me, but how can you talk about it giving more rights when statistics clearly show the exact opposite? They are suffering more and more. And I'm going to come back to that later. As teenagers, we all dream about our future careers, what we'll do, how much we'll earn, and the life we'll build. But imagine a future where no matter how hard you work, your paycheck depends on an app or whether someone felt generous enough to tip you. Unfortunately, this is the reality of 70% of gig workers as published by Statista, specialized in economy and politics. Honorable Chair, esteemed judges, and respected members of the opposition, we are standing at a crossroads today. The gig economy, as hailed by some as the solution to the change in labor markets, is nothing but a dangerous regression. It's not innovation, it's exploitation. We cannot afford to overlook the deep liabilities it introduces for workers worldwide, ones that your house is willingly ignoring. Moreover, you don't know my 25-year-old cousin, do you? Well, before you ask what does he have to do with any of this, let me tell you. He saw an online ad for gig jobs, signed up, and was accepted. At first, he was ecstatic. And by time, and I mean just a week or two, that excitement quickly turned into exhaustion. He was working more, earning less. And then the punchline, his employer calls him in, tells him they no longer needed him, and boots him out with no explanation, no severance, just a cold and personal goodbye. If this does not scream exploitation, I don't know what does. To put this into perspective, consider the data. According to the latest gig economy research from the Association of Entrepreneurship, in 2020, 64% of gig workers earned less than $500 per month. And by 2023, that number has grown to 67%. Similarly,
80% of gig workers earned less than $1,000 in 2020, growing to 84%. Meanwhile, only 10% earned around $2,000 in 2020, which dropped, mind you, to 9% in 2023. Doesn't this strike you as rather concerning? These statistics show a clear pattern. Gig workers are earning less year after year. Is that good? Does that go along with your delusion? No, it definitely does not. Furthermore, gig work is a gamble, a risky balancing act between opportunity and uncertainty. Take Maria, a rideshare driver in her mid-30s. Some days she can make just enough to pay rent, but when the weather is bad or the rush hour is over, she's left scrambling to make ends meet. She has gone entire months where her earnings barely cover her bills, and because there's no steady paycheck, she can't even plan for things like a sick day, let alone save for her future. I'm not done yet. I insist on asking you one last question. If the gig economy is the model of progress that you are so proudly defending, tell me, what exactly does it say about us as a society that we have normalized a future where workers are supposed to gamble their entire livelihoods based on unpredictable short-term tasks? Are we really building a better future or just a world where people have to fight tooth and nail to survive with no guarantee of anything? I hope you can answer that, because I'm pretty sure that what you're stating seems more like a fairy tale than a feasible plan. Thank you.
Dear Government House, if you had listened to our Leader of Opposition's intervention, you would have heard that many of the statistics she said proved that gig workers are getting their rights. Anyways, dear audience, honorable jury, fellow opponents, good morning. It really is a good morning, isn't it? Isn't it amazing to think that we live in a world where you can live off of your passion, or at least make money off of it as a side hustle? Now, I know our opponents might jump in and say, but gig workers don't have all of their rights yet. And they're right, for now. But let's be real. The gig economy is growing so fast, even the government has trouble keeping up. But eventually, they'll have to catch up and start handing out rights like free Wi-Fi at coffee shops. Now, let's zoom out for a second and talk about the big picture. Gig economy actually opens the door for more international global business collaborations, which widely help the global economy. Digital platforms enable workers to collaborate from different countries and regions and trade services, bridging geographic and cultural gaps. For instance, a graphic designer in the Philippines can work for a startup company in the US, or a freelance journalist in Kenya can work for a newspaper in the UK, and so on and so forth. This connectivity accelerates the flow of talent, ideas, and capital across borders, contributing to a more inclusive and interconnected global economy. Now let's speak money. Don't we all love money? But you know who loves money than all of us? Our lovely government. And you know what generates a lot of that money for the government? You guessed it, the gig economy. A 2019 study by MasterCard estimated that the global gig economy generates $204 billion in gross volume. And in 2022, brace yourselves, it generated nearly $4 trillion in revenue. Yes, you heard right. It went from $204 billion to $4 trillion in only 3 years. I mean, isn't that incredible? And just to show you how global this is, in 2023, freelancers alone contributed $1.27 trillion to the US economy. But let's not get distracted talking just about the money, although I could happily talk about it all day. There's also job creation. The gig economy has opened up new avenues for employment that were once inaccessible to many.
Please.
Yes?
So you're basically saying that while being engaged in a gig work, you're earning enough money. So my question to you is, does earning enough money necessarily means that your rights are actually guaranteed?
No, that's not what I said. I said that the gig economy is contributing to the global economy, and that highlights its importance, and thus the government will give gig workers their rights. Anyways, the gig economy has opened up new avenues for employment for particularly in industries that were once inaccessible to many. According to a 2020 report by the McKinsey Global Institute, over 162 million people in Europe and the USA alone engaged in some form of gig work. And these aren't just little side hustles, people, they're actual careers. I mean, I'm not saying everyone's out here pulling a full-time job being an Uber driver, but some people are actually making enough income to support themselves and their families. And here's the best part. This isn't just good for the gig workers, it's good for the economy as well. More people working means more taxes, which means more public services and more infrastructure. And in addition to that, gig workers, especially in fields like tech and design, often drive innovation and improve productivity, which are key drivers for long-term economic growth. I mean, who wouldn't want to be part of a system that turns everyone into a contributor to society? Can't argue with that, right, dear opponents? Ladies and gentlemen, while the gig economy might still have some kinks to iron out, like, getting fair rights for all its workers, it's clear that the impact it has on global economy is undeniable. It has proven itself to be a powerful force for growth and innovation, and as it continues to expand, it is inevitable that the governments will adapt, ensuring fair rights and protections for workers, just as they have done with other evolving industries in the past. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Before I get to start, I would love to answer the opposite team, where the leader of opposition obviously claims that the gig economy comes with progress, and then the deputy leader of opposition claims obviously that there are statistics that proves that while being a gig worker, none of your rights are actually eroded. Well, so my question to you is, how can you explain that while being a gig worker, the majority of your rights are eroded when you are facing unstable income and not enough, sorry, this is not what I wanted to say, lack of protection also most of the times, and dangerous working conditions. And so, before I get to start, hello everyone, dear audience, dear opposite team, esteemed judges, greetings to you all. I'm very happy and amazingly honored to be here with all of you again. And so, I guess we're talking about gig economy, as most frequently described to be this job where you can be free, uncontrolled, and independent. Go ahead.
So you're here talking about how the gig economy right now in the present doesn't give enough rights to workers. Well, we're here talking about the rise of gig economy jobs. So we're talking about the future. So what can you say about that?
Where basically the main topic is that the gig economy leads to the erosion of workers' rights. So my point was very obvious. You're talking about gig economy. Well, obviously, as I claimed before, it does lead to the erosion of workers' rights, and so many aspects I'll be answering later on my intervention. As I was saying to your audience, most frequently described to be a job where you can be free, independent, and uncontrolled, sadly, most likely leads us to visualize this Uber driver safely on his way to job clients and earn his own living, or perhaps this young delivery guy providing services and managing to pay his own taxes or whatever. But really, do you genuinely think that defines or that it even describes what a real gig economy job looks like? I don't think so. There's an annual study, according to the Journal of Urban Health, that shows that among 67% of delivery gig workers in New York City alone, about 42% of them have reported their experiences with extreme injuries and physical assaults. Meanwhile, for Uber driving, another very, very common gig economy job, guess what? The Uber company itself has officially published a report in July 2019 emphasizing the very serious number of incidents, including violence from passengers and many other forms of physical harm. Now, in an average scenario of a fully employed worker, there comes the job of what we call a health insurance, which regardless of how unnecessary it might seem, I guess it is thanks to those gig jobs that we're able to identify what it was meant for in the first place. Because without a single framework to protect the bare minimum of his rights, which is his physical safety first, a gig worker will obviously end up forced to face the consequences alone. And so, how convenient for you to address the advantages of a job, knowing fully well that the healthcare expenses can be just outrageous in so many gig economy countries. And the result will obviously be at the expense of his health, that if not cost him his entire life, of course. And when we take a step back and we start, re-questioning what is this whole gig economy good for, we often hear speaking about flexibility. Oh, what a joke. Because don't you understand? This whole flexibility concept is a professionally studied trap. Hear me out. A job that is flexible simply means a job to which you can be available 24/7 and with the most likely weak, unstable income. And because you only get paid for the number of hours you work, what happens is that you end up working more and more, trying to secure enough work in order to earn more money. And I guess that was it. Thank you very much.
I guess you're clearly changing the topic to your liking because you keep giving statistics about how the rights are and not, now and not how they can evolve. Dear audience, respected members of the jury, esteemed members of the government, greetings. Life is beautiful, isn't it? The opportunities we have to shape our own futures. The freedom to rise, the freedom to work how, when, and where we want. These are all things that make life more fulfilling. And yet, we stand here debating whether the rise of the gig economy will erode workers' rights. But as we look around, isn't it clear that this isn't about the death of workers' rights, but rather the expansion of them? Well, the gig economy is the gig economy is simply another evolution of the working world, one that opens up doors rather than closes them. Now, to reframe the discussion, let's put the topic in a more direct question. Will the rise of the gig economy will lead to the erosion of workers' rights, but maybe to but rather expanding them? Well, if I suppose if you're good with numbers, as the members of the government clearly should be. This is as simple as math. More gig workers equals more people demanding better rights. But our opponents insist that adding more workers will lead to the erosion of, will lead to fewer rights for them. It's very simple. The more workers join, the more their collective voice will be heard. The gig workers aren't simply going to fade into the background. They're organized, they're vocal, and they're demanding for better conditions. And they're winning. And yes, I know the government would bring up protests as if that somehow undermines the validity of gig workers' rights. But let's take a moment to acknowledge something about today's society. Well, people can protest for anything now. Anything. Yes?
Our point here is if the gig economy takes the rights out of those workers, not if it'll actually help them or it will develop or something that will make it just become something better. It's taking the rights out of them.
But we're talking here about the evolution of the rights, you know. We're talking here about the future, not, the evolving of the rights in the future. Okay, back on. I said, in a world where society gives individuals such the right to ask for such things, it's not a stretch to believe that gig workers can demand for their rights and have their voices heard too. Well, what we are witnessing is a shift in power dynamics. Because businesses know they cannot afford to ignore the voices of their workers anymore. Especially when the gig economy is evolving. Today's companies cares about her workers' interests, and they care because it's in their best interest to do so. The truth is, if companies don't listen to the demands of her workforce, well, they risk facing major backlash and losing their competitive edge. A workforce that is ignored becomes a workforce. Okay, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, before starting, I would like to answer our dear opposing house. If you are truly listening to what we were saying, you would have heard us talking about the workers' future, which is only getting worse. Another thing I must say is that if the gig economy is truly raking in more money, as said by the deputy leader of the opposition, then that means that companies are raking in money while the most gig workers earn less than $1,000 per month, as said by our Prime Minister and our deputy. And don't you also see that higher tax rates mean less rights? More on that later. Ladies and gentlemen, dear opposition, honorable members of the jury, the gig economy may be characterized by freelance, flexibility, and for some, even short-term employment, but is sadly also characterized by exploitation and unsteady income. A fact that our opposing house cannot refute. A gig worker will simply never have the same value as a normal one, even in the future. Most countries don't even consider gigs jobs. For example, yes, accept it.
You said that that the rise of taxes actually means less workers' rights. How do you explain that?
The rise of taxes means less workers' rights because it simply means that they are getting less money than before, and the money is gained by the government. Do you understand that? Meaning that their buying power gets less, and also their power in, for example, if they need healthcare, also becomes less. Thank you. The IRS, which stands for Internal Revenue Service, classifies gig workers as independent contractors, as said by the leader of the opposition. But what they fail to notice here is that them being classified this way means that even if they earn more than a measly $400, they are obligated to pay tax rates. You can't even live with $400 in the United States. Yet, here I am telling you, you have to exclude from the small sum you call salary your tax margins? Well, I'm sure our dear opposing house here is currently telling me to come back to the Moroccan reality, correct? So to answer them, I will do just that. In Morocco, workers under what the government calls a contract have the same tax obligations and rates as someone under a permanent contract. But the problem here is, as said by our team, gig workers do not benefit from a steady income. But yet, here I am telling you they pay the same taxes as someone who has a constant salary. Don't you find that somewhat absurd? And to rub even more salt in the burn, gig workers can see their contract cancelled at any time without the obligation of being ever indemnized for being, for example, fired of their work, no matter the reason given by said companies. Well, another fact that I find necessary to talk about is how gig work is raising multiple concerns when it comes to the traditional employment sectors. Let us take, for example, something that everybody knows, Airbnb, a website that allows anyone to rent his house, which falls under the same category as a gig job. Airbnb has led to a massive disruption in the traditional hospitality sector, as said by the directors of operations in the Indian Center for Economical Research. The problem with such a website is that it creates an unbalanced competition, meaning that multiple hotels have to close down because they simply cannot keep up with the low prices of Airbnb. So, ladies and gentlemen, to conclude what I have to say, I will tell you all what's wrong with today's subject. It's how society views it. For example, we have people like our opponents here that say that the gig economy may lead to a better professional future. But, as you all have seen right now, this is completely unbased and wrong. The only way we can balance gigs and jobs is to, of course, see gigs how we were supposed to. A small chore for pocket money and nothing more. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the gig economy has been accused of many things. Being exploitative, unstable, or even chaotic. But let's be honest, most of us probably use the gig worker today, whether it was the rideshare driver who got you here on time, or the delivery food driver who delivered your food, or even the handyman who prevented your IKEA furniture from looking like modern art. Either way, the gig economy is woven into our daily lives. And it's not just here to stay, it's growing. And with growth comes responsibility, a responsibility to do better, to ensure fairness. Let's start with the most obvious point. Treating gig workers fairly benefits everyone. Giving them rights similar to traditional employees not only improves their well-being, but it also increases their productivity. It's common sense. Imagine this. A well-paid, empowered gig worker is more likely to be effective and, let's face it, less likely to accidentally spill your coffee. The research backs this up. Studies by organizations like the Oxford Internet Institute show that platforms with responsible labor practices see better results for everyone involved. Yes, you heard that right. Being ethical is good business. It's like upgrading from a rickety bus to a luxury electric vehicle. It's smoother, it's better, and it's progress everyone can get behind. Now, let's talk about the skeptics. You know the ones. They say, reforming is too complicated. But here's the thing. Reform is already happening. Governments worldwide are stepping up with policies that reclassify gig workers or introduce hybrid models that are bridging the gap between flexibility and fairness. So why won't the workers get their rights? Let's not pretend... Yes, accepted.
Is flexibility truly meaningful if workers are forced to accept any gig work at any time just to make ends meet?
Well, if you were listening to my intervention, which I am about to finish and you will get the point, it's all about how it is inevitable to give the gig workers rights in the future. So why won't the workers get their rights? Let's not pretend this is a moral question. The companies need to spend years deliberating. It's economics. Treating workers fairly means better labor practices, which means better retention, happier customers, and stronger platforms. If that's not enough for you, then think about this. Platforms that ignore these demands not only lose workers, but they'll also lose customers. In today's world, a bad review is far scarier than any government retention. If the companies don't shape up, the market will force them to. Now, let's imagine the future for a moment. Picture a gig economy where workers are empowered and treated with dignity. Your driver pulls up with a smile, your delivery arrives on time, and people behind the scenes are thriving, not struggling to make ends meet. It's a win-win-win. Ladies and gentlemen, the gig economy isn't a threat. It's an opportunity. an opportunity to prove that progress does not have to leave people behind. Thank you.
My dearest audience, here we meet again. As this debate is getting close to its ending, I want to ask you, what kind of freedom leaves workers powerless? What kind of opportunity strips away their basic human rights? You call it flexibility. I call it corporations' gain. Because the people who are driving this economy forward are suffering every day. This is not empowerment. It's exploitation at its purest as a modern disguise. My government does not refuse the change, but we will not accept the progress that comes as the cost of fairness. We need a gig economy that works for everyone and not just those at the top. I urge you to stand up with us and put our people before our profits. Thank you.
The gig economy isn't just a trend. It's the new normal, whether we like it or not. Therefore, we must ensure that gig workers receive their rights, proper treatment, and access to benefits. Yes, it might be challenging, but isn't fairness worth the effort? The answer to that is pretty obvious, though it may not be to you, Government House. Ladies and gentlemen, let's face it, we can't just tackle modern challenges with outdated perspectives. Thankfully, some nations have already come to that realization, with countries adapting benefits to their gig workers, companies taking steps to protect them, and public support growing. Now, my question to you, dear opponents, is how can we take a step backward when we've already taken steps forward? How can we undo progress that's already been set in motion? Looking at you, I can tell you have the answer to that. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, here I am standing before you once more to address some concerns and to redirect this debate to the path it's supposed to follow. First off, the topic clearly is the right of gig economy will lead to the erosion of workers' rights. We already stated that the percentage of gig workers' incomes shows that they are earning less year after year. How can you claim that it will be progress and that it will be better if it's only going backwards? And then, in addition to that, the system you're encouraging doesn't only just fail to solve our problems, it actually also helps to create them. Stripping workers out of their dignity while reducing their workers' rights and roles and reducing them to tasks. Thank you.
Dear Government House, if you had actually listened to our interventions, you would have gotten our point. Please don't put words in our mouths that we didn't say. What we said is the benefits of the gig economy highlights its importance, and therefore the government will have to give gig workers their rights. Our leader of opposition talked about how there's progress of the workers' rights being made in multiple countries, and so the other countries will automatically follow. And respectfully, you should stop rehashing the same argument. We know the gig workers don't have their rights yet. We know they don't have access to healthcare, but eventually they will. And eventually, thanks to all the benefits it brings to the economy and all the improvements being made all over the world, gig workers will have their rights. Thank you.
Dear audience, there was actually another point that I genuinely wanted to address, which is that we as humans, we tend to forget a lot that our jobs are not only missions that we complete, serving others and then earning a paycheck for it at the end of each month. No, they are mainly gateways that allows us to build careers through which we meet new people, we experience new challenges and build a character of our own. And so, think about it, those gig economy jobs, which are inherently short-term, well, they make it 100% impossible to build any sort of career. So, okay, we get it. You want to work on your own, be a freelancer, an Uber driver, whatever. Okay. But until when exactly? Like, when are you going to be ready to settle down, start your own family to which you provide a stable income, and be like anybody else? And even, let's just say, for the argument's sake, you have no intentions to start a family or follow any traditional path. But what you're missing is that while involving in a gig economy job, you do not evolve. Thank you.
Well, I think your second intervention is kind of irrelevant to the topic. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, here I am again. The gig economy's growth also calls into question the long-standing disparity in power between employers and employees. Well, the employer used to have most of the power, setting the terms of employment, wages, and working conditions. However, gig workers can now provide their services and abilities to several organizations and clients, making it more difficult for companies to recruit and retain talent in competitive markets. In the end, this change benefits the employees themselves by pushing businesses to be more adaptable, creative, and sensitive to their requirements. In this way, the gig economy is enabling workers to become consumers of their own labor, allowing them to decide who they work for and under what conditions, in addition to extending their rights. This newly acquired authority is changing the very nature of the work itself. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the member of the government's second intervention is maybe irrelevant to you because you didn't hear, just like how our deputy has been accusing us of not hearing from the start. And the second thing is that accepting something is tied to obligation and inevitability, which in this concept are pejorative, since what you are saying means you agree with the fact that gig workers are suffering. So how will suffering lead to a better future? Ladies and gentlemen, honorable members of the jury, dear audience, this gig job pandemic currently taking over the worldwide economy is truly an evolution, but sadly, in the wrong way. Even a toddler can notice how this change has led to people becoming even bigger slaves to their work life and consumerism. So, dear audience, I ask you to please stand up against this dystopian future we are headed to. And not just for our rights, but also our children's rights. Thank you.
Dear opponents, I was really surprised by what you have to say, because I was not expecting this. I feel like you got the whole topic wrong, because as we proved with research from reliable sources, progress will give the gig workers rights, because it is simply better for everyone. Yet you keep missing the point, because probably you aren't listening to us. You keep saying that it's only getting worse, but you clearly have no basis for that and no reliable sources. Please listen and stop feeding the audience lies. Thank you.